along with the PowerPoint that you will be seeing today. If you have questions along the way, please don't hesitate to add them to the chat box. We'll be answering them at the end of the call or throughout the presentation, but please continue to communicate with us as the participation is happening. We're so excited today to talk about really women's health, also well-being in the workplace. Today, we're going to be talking about the American Heart Association and Heart Month and the upcoming events that we have that are going to be happening over the next 28 days. Also, women's health and the impact on stress and how we can manage that stress level a little bit better, prioritizing the health in the workplace, not only for you, but also everyone around you and your peers, and really exploring that mind-body-heart connection and how using this knowledge is going to benefit your health. We're so excited. We have two remarkable speakers that are going to be joining us today, and we'll be able to really dive into all of these pieces. We have Megan Ely, who works for the American Heart Association, who has responsibilities of our women's marketing relationship portfolio management. So Megan, thank you so much for joining us, and we are so excited to hear about all the amazing things that are going to be happening this month.
Thank you so much, Paisley, and thanks again to everyone for joining today. I have the incredible pleasure of telling you about our Heart Month theme. So this week kicks off Heart Month, which is hands down our favorite month of the entire year. And as we think about women's health, we know that since the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, deaths from heart disease and stroke have risen, and people are reporting lower physical and emotional well-being. And while we know that COVID's top of mind, the simple fact is cardiovascular disease remains the #1 killer of women. So this February, the American Heart Association is bringing everyone together and calling on all of us to reclaim our rhythm and take back control of our mental and physical well-being. So over the past 2 years, many people, myself included, have adopted some unhealthy behaviors like skipping exercise or eating unhealthy foods or drinking more alcohol or using tobacco, all of which can increase our risk factors for heart disease and stroke. So this Heart Month, we're calling on everyone to reclaim your rhythm and have 5 ways you can join us in making these healthy moves today for a healthier tomorrow. So the first is moving to the music, really ramping up that physical activity. And we have all these tools and resources to get people started and keep them engaged all Heart Month long. The next is feeding your soul and rocking your recipes. We have tons of heart healthy recipes and tips and tricks you can use when cooking to make sure that you're really nourishing your body in the best way possible. Of course, there's the chance to stay on beat with your blood pressure and really manage your blood pressure and make sure you're watching your numbers. The next, keeping the beat with hands-only CPR. We know that hands-only CPR can save a life with 2 simple steps, and it's a great way to incorporate music as you think about matching that rhythm of life-saving CPR. And then, of course, there's the chance to mellow out and reduce stress. We know that stress leads to unhealthy habits and can make such a difference on your overall mental well-being and physical health. And it's something we're going to definitely talk about more today as we really explore that mind-body connection. And one of the things that's the most fun for this Heart Month, as part of a collaboration with Pandora, the streaming service, we've actually done a station takeover. And there are 3 different modes to use music to inspire you to get healthier this Heart Month. We have an entire mode that is songs of survivors. Our incredible class of real women survivors picked their personal anthems to inspire you to get heart healthy. We also have an incredible mode that focuses on celebrated Black artists as we bring forward Black History Month and talk about the importance of celebrating those in our community. And then, of course, we have a third mode that is all music you can dance to and groove to. And a fun fact, it's all songs with beats between 100 and 120 beats per minute, which is that perfect rhythm for hands-only CPR. So we have all the music and the tools and the resources to help you get that groove back this Heart Month and really reclaim your rhythm, because losing one mom, sister, woman, friend to cardiovascular disease is one too many. Now, as we start Heart Month, there's so many exciting opportunities, but one of the most is this Friday is National Wear Red Day. The first Friday of every February, the nation goes red to raise awareness about cardiovascular disease. So we invite you, join us, wear red, help us share this message, post on social with the hashtag Wear Red Day. There's so many ways you can go red. And if you go to wearred.org, you can check out more ways and resources, fun tools, tips, tricks, all the things that you need to celebrate National Wear Red Day. We have a lot of activities planned for Friday, but there's two I wanted to make sure we called out as fun ways you can get involved with the Heart Association. The first is with Sybil Wilkes. Sybil Wilkes, the incredible pioneer, is helping us really celebrate Black History Month. Her podcast is going to be dedicated to talking with Black Americans about their health and well-being and the importance of prioritizing taking care of ourselves. So we have a lot of great things planned with Sybil in the months ahead, but are really thrilled that she's helping us bring that message to life with her podcast this Friday. And the next thing, on Friday evening, you'll want to join us on TikTok. So TikTok influencer and two-time heart surgery survivor, JT Laybourne, is going to help us raise awareness and critical funds during Heart Month. JT will be joined by some celebrity guests, which is very exciting, including Sharif O'Neal, who's the son of Hall of Fame basketball player Shaquille O'Neal, and a heart survivor himself, who had open heart surgery in 2018 and had to learn to walk again. You don't want to miss this, so be sure to tune in and check out JT's profile. And when you see his profile photo, it'll say live. So you can click that and join in all the fun. We have so many incredible plans for all of Heart Month to help you reclaim your rhythm and find that groove again. But to get us started and get a little bit of inspiration, we have a video that really talks about ways you can reclaim your rhythm today.
It's been 2 years. We're tired. We're burnt out. We're just trying to get by. But today is the day. It's time to reclaim your rhythm. Pick your playlist and put on your favorite red look. With your jams turned up, get moving. Bring the good vibes and take back control of your health and mental well-being. Little steps add up to big changes. From dancing with your kids in the kitchen to grooving with your girlfriends, staying active is one of the best ways to keep your body and mind healthy. Stress can lead to unhealthy habits, and managing stress means managing your health. So reclaim control of your schedule and build in time to invest in a healthier you. Know your numbers and make moves to help keep your blood pressure on track. Go Red for Women will be here every step of the way. So let's do this together and create healthy habits today that will lead to healthier tomorrows. How will you reclaim your rhythm?
Thank you so much, Megan. We really appreciate you sharing all the amazing things that are going to happen this month. We are incredibly lucky and excited to have Erin Michos with us, who has associate professor at the Division of Cardiology at Johns Hopkins School of Medicine, and that she is Associate Director of Preventative Cardiology. She is internationally known and an expert to preventative cardiology and women's health, and has authored over 500 publications and chapter books. She is a co-author and chief of American Journal of Preventative Cardiology and is a longtime volunteer of the American Heart Association and has also served several committees. So we're not only incredibly lucky to have you here with us, but also what you give us year in and year out to really help the mission of the organization. She completed a medical school at Northwestern University and internal medicine residency and cardiology fellowship at Johns Hopkins Hospital, and a Master of Health and Science degree at Johns Hopkins School of Public Health. And so thank you so much for your time and sharing so much of your knowledge with this group. We're going to benefit so much from it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here for this webinar. And this especially is a topic near and dear to my heart, as I, like many of you, are still working on my wellness journey. Especially this is a topic important to me because I was a co-author on an American Heart Association scientific statement that came out last year that was exactly about this topic, the mind, heart, body connection. And this is a really important topic because the mind, heart, and body are all interconnected. And so psychological and mental health influences physical health. And so cardiovascular disease can't be addressed in isolation, but it's really part of an integrated system. And so clinicians need to treat the whole person and not just the disease state. And as we'll talk about in the next few slides, both positive factors, favorable factors, and negative adverse factors affect heart health, even independently of each other. So, we can't talk about stress, health without talking about stress. And so, what is stress? Well, I think we've all experienced stress. So, what it is, stress it can be from interpersonal relationships, previous trauma, financial constraints, employment related, neighborhood, community, society, political policies, discrimination, or unexpected natural disasters like this pandemic we've been in the last 2 years. So, it's a lot. And how the body experiences it. So stress is the body's response to a physical, chemical, emotional, or environmental stress. And so there are actual physiological changes. And stress can both be short-term and sort of acute changes, but there also can have long-term effects on the body. So what happens during stress? Well, we're activating the sympathetic nervous system. So this is your fight or flight response that, revs up the body for fight or flight. So, you have this increase in heart rate, an increase in blood pressure. There's a release of those stress hormones, this cortisol. Your breathing can go up, your oxygen rate, your muscles can tense up. There also can be a trigger of sort of this negative cascade where an increase in inflammatory markers. If the stress is chronic and ongoing, there can be sort of this low-grade inflammation. There can be this low-grade elevation in stress hormones that lead to increases in the body's blood glucose. And these sort of adverse metabolic changes can lead to, more weight gain and fat deposition around in the waist, which is the riskier type of fat deposits. So, how can stress present itself? I think this is, all of us has experienced stress at some point in our lives. And so we may have experienced all of these symptoms, fatigue, low energy, GI symptoms like nausea, heartburn, aches, pains, tense muscles, again, because, we tense up when we're under a chronic stress all the time, trouble sleeping, sweating, chest pain or racing heart. And I should mention that people can have known or unknown underlying cardiovascular disease. And so this physical changes with the increase in blood pressure and heart rate can actually manifest or trigger the presence of underlying cardiovascular disease, where people can have angina or chest pain because they're not able to meet the increased body's metabolic demand related to stress. There can be, other changes related to this, these adverse sort of hormones, with hair loss and weight gain, acne. It can affect irregular menses, irregular periods. People who are under stress can often lose disinterest in many hobbies or things that they previously enjoyed, including disinterest in sexual activity. There can be headaches and dizziness. So there's lots of physical symptoms, so real physical symptoms that might be stemming from underlying psychological stress. So there's some literature that suggests that while stress can impact everybody, that it may more adversely affect women even more than men. There's even studies that look at, for example, the impact of a divorce and showed that women who've had divorce or multiple divorce, the stress from that, they're at greater risk for a heart attack than men who have gone through divorce. Similarly, after a heart attack, women are more likely to be rehospitalized in the year after a heart attack. And it's been thought that a lot of untreated social and psychological stressors may be contributing to their poor outcomes after a heart attack. So it's really important that, again, we address the whole person. So in the setting of a stressful event that can possibly trigger a heart attack, women are 38% more likely to have a cardiovascular event when experiencing high work stress. And we're having this Heart Month, we're having this conference because cardiovascular disease still remains the leading cause of death in women. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of deaths with COVID. It's moved into third place, but cardiovascular disease is still #1 cause of death. And it's more deadly than all cancers combined. And I know a lot of women, including myself, worry about breast cancer. My mother is a breast cancer survivor, so it's always on my mind. But if you look at statistics, still women are more likely to die of cardiovascular disease than cancer. And so just like we get our mammograms, we need to get our heart checks as well, our risk factors checked. because and how this impacts stress. A lot of these risk factors that lead to cardiovascular disease, including higher blood pressure, elevated blood glucose, being overweight, having a poor diet, are more common among women who express greater stress at the home or at work. So again, I said this before, but cardiovascular disease is the leading cause of death, and just put some numbers around it. It affects 44 million women in the United States. But the reason why I like being a preventive cardiologist is that it's thought that cardiovascular disease, about 90% of it is preventable. There's some types that are not preventable. There are some congenital heart disease that people are born with. And there are some, strong genetic causes, but most of it, 90% of it, is through these modifiable risk factors. And this is why I really like the American Heart Association has this thing called the Life's Simple 7. And there are 7 factors that are all modifiable, meaning we can change them because we can't change our age or our gender or sex or our family history. But these are 7 modifiable factors for heart health. Diet, physical activity, not smoking, having a healthy weight, healthy blood pressure, healthy cholesterol, blood glucose. And individuals who meet, more than 5 of these or as close to 7 of these healthy factors have a much lower rates of cardiovascular disease, as well as non-cardiovascular disease as well. So there's different types of heart disease. So of course, there's valve disease and there's rhythm disease, there's congenital heart disease. But really what I'm sort of focusing on this talk in terms of preventable risk factors is heart disease due to atherosclerosis. And atherosclerosis also can lead to stroke and disease in the blood vessels called peripheral arterial disease. So atherosclerosis is a process that develops over decades where plaque is building up in the arteries due to these risk factors like high cholesterol and inflammation, where there's fatty depositions in the arteries and the arteries become inflamed. And so these are the traditional risk factors for cardiovascular disease that lead to atherosclerosis. So age, which we can't change, but older age is a risk. Tobacco smoking is one of the major risk factors in women, and again, preventable. High cholesterol, high blood pressure, diabetes, having a family history of cardiovascular disease. And so these are, known risk factors that we all should be getting checked and knowing our numbers. But we're also understanding the importance of a lot of what we sort of call newer risk factors, the importance of inflammation and autoimmune disease like rheumatoid arthritis and lupus that are more common in women are also associated with increased risk of cardiovascular disease. Being sedentary and having poor fitness. We're understanding a lot more about the impact of social determinants of health, financial strain, issues related to structural racism and how these social issues affect cardiovascular health. And then what we're focusing on today is the psychological factors, which again can be very tied to social stressors related to stress and mental health. There's, risks related to air pollution. There's lots of things that are not on this list, including chronic kidney disease. This is not an exhaustive list, but there's other risk factors that are also important for heart health. So, there's a lot of talk out there about women presenting differently for a heart attack. I don't like the word atypical because how can anything be atypical if women make up half of the population? But it is important for women to understand what are common signs of heart attacks in women. And note that studies have suggested when you look at heart attacks in men versus women, actually 90% of women do have some kind of chest discomfort with their heart attack. So they do, in majority, have some kind of chest discomfort. It's just that in the setting of a heart attack, women often have lots of other symptoms. And sometimes all of those symptoms can be distracting to both the patients and their clinicians, where they start thinking maybe it's another cause, as a panic attack or indigestion, and this can lead to the heart attack not being recognized in a timely fashion. So what are common signs of heart attack? Well, again, many women do experience in the setting of a heart attack some chest discomfort. They don't often describe it as pain. Sometimes it can be heaviness, squeezing, tightness, pressure. While the heart sits on the left side of the chest, this doesn't always be on the left side. It can sometimes be in the right side. It can go into the shoulder or the back. Many women experience pain in their neck or their jaw. Often they're short of breath. this is in the setting of a heart attack, which is we're talking about, an acute event. They often don't feel well. They can be lightheaded, they can be nauseated, even vomiting. This is the settings of sort of an acute heart attack. Now, there can be stable forms of cardiovascular disease, angina due to blockages, where some of these women may get symptoms when you exercise or in stressful situations that go away with rest, where a heart attack is more of an acute presentation, kind of comes on suddenly, often even at rest. But these are some of the warning signs that if people are experiencing these and they sit and rest and they're not going away, should be calling 911 and seeking emergency attention. So, the challenges that women go through are not, have been around a long time, but the pandemic has made it even worse. 77% of women have said in the pandemic, actually their workload has increased at their job, and 40% of mothers have increased, caregiving by at least 15 hours or more per week, with schools being closed and daycare not being as reliable, and this has fallen on the burden of women who often are holding full-time jobs on top of this increased caregiving burden. And unfortunately, statistics have shown that suggest that 57% of women plan to quit their jobs in the next 2 years due to poor work-life balance. And this is really alarming because we will lose substantial talent from our workforce. These women are well educated and talented, important contributors, and we need a diverse workforce. And so we need to create healthy workplace environments that are supportive of all employees, men and women, so that we can retain the best possible talent, which will be the best outcomes for employers. So, these challenges that all of us have been experiencing, are even worse for some women than others. During COVID, women of color were more likely to be laid off or furloughed, which is, of course, a threat for their financial security, which is one of those social determinants of health. At home, women of color and single moms are more burdened by housework and caregiving. And at work, women of color are disproportionately represented in low-wage jobs, making them less likely to have benefits. So first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about resilience and coping with stress, but I just want to put, the caveat out there. Sometimes, that this burden shouldn't just be on the individual. It's not just about, you just need to be more resilient. It's not the canary in the coal mine's fault that the canary is not resilient enough. So a lot of these changes need to happen by employers in the workplace, in society, to make things better for all. So there definitely needs to be larger structural and society changes. But there are things that we can do as an individual to help cultivate wellness in our lives. And we can't avoid all stress. Stress sometimes is unavoidable. My 37-year-old brother died suddenly last year. All of us experience things in our life, and many of us experience grief. And, we don't move on from grief. We learn to live with grief and move forward with grief. So there are things we can do to help cope with stress, and everybody is sort of unique a little bit in what their healthy coping mechanisms are. For me, I'm a runner. I exercise every day. This is really important for me. I do it every morning at 5 a.m., but this is the time that's my time in the world. That's the time carved up just for me, and it's become a habit. And so that's been really important part of my psychological wellness. Of course, it doesn't have to be at 5 a.m. for you, but we'll go back to the previous slide. But it can be, trying to get at least 30 minutes a day, following a balanced diet, not smoking, trying to find time to relax every day. So that sympathetic nervous system, that flight or fright. So the parasympathetic system, the autonomic nervous system, is the relaxation, digestion. So the vagal system lowers the heart rate, lowers the blood pressure. So it's trying to find time to relax, whether it's meditation, reflective thinking, yoga, trying to go to bed early with a book. Carving that relaxation time is so important to kind of, again, down regulate all of that sympathetic activation. There's a lot of data about the importance of having social connections. So people who have a social isolation, loneliness, that's an adverse cardiovascular risk. So bonding with friends and families. And, remembering that it's okay to say no to things, that sometimes we get overburdened. So making choices selectively, because a yes to something is a no to something else. And sometimes a no to something else is, our family time, our exercise time, our personal time. And so, choosing our activities are selectively. And there's a way to say no politely, especially if you're being asked for a committee or an organization to maybe suggest another name of somebody that might be good to help out the organizers. But we don't, time is finite. We can't do everything. And we, taking responsibility for our actions, understanding our North Star, our core values, and living by them. And when we're living our life more aligned with our values, we'll be much more at psychological peace. Really reminding ourselves all the things that we do well. Sometimes we're our own worst critics, but where there's a lot that we do well. And I think some positive self-affirmation is really good. I think also setting realistic goals and expectations are important. And getting adequate rest, the importance of sleep. Studies have shown that insufficient sleep is associated with increased cardiovascular risk. And making that appointment to get your cardiovascular health check. So making sure you get those preventative visits to get all your blood pressure, cholesterol, your body mass index, all those things measured are so important. Next slide. So now I'm just curious, I'm going to reach out to our participants here, our audience. How do you cope with stress? As I mentioned, exercise is my favorite way, but if you might want to put in your chat, we'll give a couple minutes here. I'm curious what there's some ideas on the slide. So if people want to put in what they do. Yes, I love music too. And exercise, walking the dog is great. You have the importance of, we did a statement from the HA about pet ownership and how that could be cardiovascular protection as well as exercise. So there's great scenarios, relaxation, reading long walks. I love this, hiking, exercising, reading crafts, reading every night, exercise, dark showers, gardening, yoga, wonderful. All right. So one thing, as I talked about, is, that activating the vagal nervous system, the parasympathetic system can help bring down the heart rate, bring down the blood pressure. So sometimes it doesn't have to be a long meditation session. Sometimes just taking 10 restorative breaths can be a pause to kind of reset. So we can take some 10 breaths now and do it as a group. So slow, deep breaths that kind of, you don't want to hyperventilate. You want to stimulate the diaphragm. So, nice and deep. And that helps, again, trigger that vagal response. All right. Good. So I try to do that every day. So way to go. You just helped increase your self-confidence and you boost your ability to deal with stress. You had a lot of great ideas in the chat of how we all try to promote wellness in our own lives. Okay, next. So getting back to the statement about how the mind and heart and body are deeply connected. So, well-being is not just the absence of disease. It's actually more about creating a healthier, happier, more fulfilling life. So I've talked about, the impact of stress, the negative things like stress and anxiety and how that can, trigger these, the stress hormones and the sympathetic nervous system and raise blood pressure and inflammation and all these bad things. But there's also literature suggesting that positive psychological factors are also associated with decreased cardiovascular risk. And this can be things like having optimism and gratitude. So people who are more optimistic actually have, on average, a lower risk of cardiovascular disease. Having a sense of purpose is really important as well. And again, social connections. And these small changes can make a big difference. So, if you're not doing these things already, we can start. And one of the things I like is keeping a gratitude journal to, whenever life is hard, just remembering all the good things that I'm grateful for. Next slide. So again, these are the sort of the negative factors can have a domino effect. So we talked about how depression or stress, one can have both direct and indirect effects. So the indirect effects is that people who are under stress or depression can have poor coping habits. So they might eat poor diets or be less likely to exercise, be less likely to go to their doctor and get a health visit. They might have more alcohol or smoking. And there also can be the direct physiologic changes I discussed as well. But these changes can lead to heart disease. But there's also a lot of literature that individuals with heart disease can be a risk factor for depression. So when someone has a heart attack, particularly when it happens unexpectedly at a younger age, people can feel, why did this happen to me? You become vulnerable with your own mortality. And often after a heart attack, we're so focused on getting on the right medicines and things that we can't neglect the importance of psychological health and addressing depression after heart attack, because when that is not well treated or addressed, that can be a risk factor for recurrence and readmission after a heart attack. But positive changes can also boost a positive chain reaction. So again, exercise is good for your heart, it reduces risk of cancer, it boosts your mood, all the healthy endorphins and this happiness. When people are happier, they tend to do healthier things. They tend to eat better because they feel better about themselves. They tend to exercise, they tend to not smoke. They might be more likely to follow preventive recommendations when they have a sense of purpose and have something to live for and look forward to. And all these things, along with getting good sleep and not smoking, can reduce the risk of heart disease. So this kind of puts it all on one slide. And again, there's these direct effects from these physiological changes and these indirect effects from habits and behaviors. But both negative psychological health can adversely affect cardiovascular health, and these positive factors of mindfulness, optimism, well-being can be favorable. And again, individuals who have a more positive psychological health tend to do these healthier habits and be more likely to have preventative screening. So let's make a change. So I want us all to reclaim our rhythm. So I want us also to give ourselves permission to, ask for help when we need it, to say no more often, feel less guilty, especially when we have to say no. To remember that our time is valuable. Our time is finite, and it's a valuable resource that we, should protect. So we should let go of the long list of shoulds. I do think it's important that we do take time to unplug, and especially that social connection with other people. And so taking sometimes a social media or news break, sometimes that can be stressful, and to surround ourselves in a more positive environment. And so we want to do these things like exercise, and it doesn't have to be exercise. Even any physical activity, any movement has heart benefit. Most cardiovascular benefit comes from moderate intensity activity, which can include things like brisk walking. So it doesn't have to be these intensive exercise like running on a treadmill or doing an intensive fitness class. We can get a lot of cardiovascular benefit from moderate activity, which includes brisk walking, gardening, dancing, yoga, all those things. Getting 7 to 9 hours of sleep is kind of the sweet spot, with too little sleep, but also sometimes too much sleep being associated with risk. Doing activities to relax our body and mind, getting those preventative visits, making sure we all know our numbers and get our health checked. And then for individuals who have significant psychological distress, getting the support that we need, such as with a mental health therapist. And then practice resiliency. So again, I do think that it's not all at the individual level. There needs to be a lot of society and structural levels beyond the individual, but there are things that we can cultivate in our own life through our behaviors, our thoughts and actions to promote well-being. And resilient individuals have a greater acceptance of life situation. It doesn't mean that bad things don't happen, but people who are more resilient have, greater acceptance that they'll get through this, and that there is a pathway forward. They have greater adaptation to uncertainty and change, taking greater self-care, and have more motivation to make lifestyle changes. And so self-care isn't selfish. You can't pour from an empty cup. So we need to make sure that in order to take care of all the other people in our lives, we need to make sure that we're in our best state too as well. And I've mentioned this before, but start with talking to your primary care doctor. Many times your primary care doctor can help with depression, anxiety. And then for those that need additional referral, your doctor could be a good source to come up with names, but to talk to a therapist or life coach if you feel overwhelmed or need help managing stress or feel mentally unwell. And how can the AHA help? Your company health and well-being culture can be scored through these American Heart Association's workforce well-being scorecard to identify areas of success and areas needing improvement. And there's different levels that AHA can recognize companies on the scorecard of health and well-being. And you can visit theheart.org for more information. And you're going to have a copy of all these slides. So you don't have to write all this information down. And so this is, I think we'll start. So get your sleep, set a bedtime alarm, get some fresh air, move your body, discuss your mental health with your doctor, name one thing that you're grateful with every day, make sure your next snack is a healthy one, find ways to help others, giving back, volunteerism can really help with cardiovascular health as well, and take 3 mindful breaths every day.
All amazing things to remember. Every time I hear you speak, I learn something new and different. And I loved all the different examples that y'all have, from walking dogs and exercising and meditation, and just taking that moment to really decompress from your day. And so we've come to the part in which you get to ask as many questions as you like. We have a few folks that have sent it to me on the DM, so I'm going to ask those questions. And then, of course, one of our very first questions that we had was, is a plant-based diet recommended by cardiologists?
So there are several different healthy diet patterns. So they are American Heart Association, American College of Cardiology prevention guidelines that I was a co-author on. You know, we recommended a diet that was rich in fruits and vegetables, whole grains, legumes, nuts, fish if you eat fish. It's a diet that's lower in saturated fats, but enriched with the healthier fats, the polyunsaturated fats that are nuts and fish, kind of like a Mediterranean style diet. And then low intake of sodium, cholesterol. You want to avoid processed foods, sugar sweetened beverages, and trans fats. So a healthy plant-based diet can fit in that. There can be healthy and unhealthy vegetarian diets. I mean, I guess you could eat potato chips and cookies all day and be plant-based. So, you know, as long as you're plant-based and following those, a plant-based diet is excellent. There's also a lot of data for a Mediterranean style diet. The DASH diet, which has a lot of these components, is also kind of meets the criteria for a healthy diet.
Great answer. So one of the questions that I love that I just got, are all stresses bad? Just thoughts on that?
No, not all stresses are bad, because you know, a little stress is actually good. I mean, stress is what motivates us to meet deadlines, to get things done. I mean, you need a little, you know, something moving us along. So I mean, you know, all stress, you know, some stress can be, you know, healthy and to be expected. I think when it becomes, and then not all stress can be avoided, like unexpected deaths or things like that. But I think it's when it becomes chronic and it's all the time and it starts leading to those physical changes we talked about and those symptoms, you know, the longer it goes on, the greater potential for long-term risk. And so this is when, you know, it depends whether this is something like a transient thing that we're going through versus whether this is, you know, more enduring. But, you know, a little stress is good. This is how I got my grant submitted last week, is, you know, I needed a little fire under me to get this, meet the deadline.
We all have it. We all have it, definitely. You know, my daughter, she's 18 and loves Grey's Anatomy. But I think this question somebody asked was so important, because I think sometimes through TV, we only see one lens of it. But what is the difference between women's stress and men's stress? And is there anything different cardiovascular?
Well, I think that, you know, people experience stress in different ways in terms of the physiologic responses. I mean, both men and women experience stress. How they express stress may be different. And also there's the impact also is not only biological, but the impact of hormones and things like that, but also gender, social, cultural. So there are maybe gender differences of what's considered socially acceptable to how to express stress. And men might be more likely than women to keep things inside. Women might be more likely to tap into those social networks, which are actually really important. In men too, we see loneliness and social isolation is associated with increased mortality in men. So I do think that both stress affects both men and women, but data does suggest that stress does seem to confer a greater risk in women for whatever reason. And it may be, we might be more vulnerable to have that sympathetic response. There's something called stress cardiomyopathy, which is an acute cardiac condition from an acute stressful event. And almost 90% of these cases are postmenopausal women. So we really think there is something about hormones and physiologic response that women might be more vulnerable to stress effects than men. Oh, I don't hear you on mute.
I'm on mute. Sorry about that. The last question just came in is how can we best support women in the workplace?
Oh, yes. Well, welcome for all of your ideas. And of course, you work in a different workplace than I do. But I really emphasize that this shouldn't be a women's issue. So I work in medicine. I'm a cardiologist. The healthy work-life balance and lifestyle changes benefits everybody. My male colleagues, they want to be with their families. They want to be with their kids. So making this just about a women issue, I think is really unfair because then there's this expectation on women. And really these changes that we can make in a workplace in terms of our work-life hours, the culture of when meetings are and the expectations really would benefit both men and women. So I think there'd be less stigma if we stop making this a women's issue, but a lifestyle issue in a workplace that benefits all employees.
This is great. This next question really taps into it as well. What are your recommendations to support employers supporting heart health and their staff? And are there any best practices that you would share with other organizations? So they want to do something. How do they start? And then, especially with our audience that is here, we may have superintendents that have 5,000, 10,000, 100,000 employees, and then a principal who has 30, 50, 60 teachers. What are some quick and easy ways that they can start talking about this in their workplace?
Yeah. So, in terms of promoting a culture of wellness, it's hard. Sometimes our life is really busy and hard to do lifestyle changes. And so when there is, I think, motivation, financial perks, whether it's health benefit dollars or drawings for, workplace things in terms of, discounts and perks and financial rewards for doing these things like not smoking, getting, physical activity, eating a, healthy diet, having, whether it's step challenges or to help motivate. I know I certainly am more motivated too when there's some kind of, carrot at the end. And so I know some companies, have these where they actually get reduction in, benefit dollars and things like that, where there's really a financial incentive to being a healthy. And it's good for employers. You have a more productive workforce when your workforce is healthy. When your workforce is not healthy and they're missing more time at work. So it really behooves employers to invest in the physical and mental health of their employees.
Thank you so much. And so I know we're at our time. Many of you have asked, how can I get the recording? Can I have access to the PowerPoint? And the answer to those questions are absolutely yes. So we'll be posting and sending an email tomorrow with the recording along with the PowerPoint and then resources that we mentioned on today's presentation. And so thank you all so much for joining us. We'll be back probably in about 30 more days with a new topic, and we'll send you the information in the next 24 hours. Thank you so much for joining us. We very much appreciate you and hope you have a fantastic Heart Healthy Month.
All right, thank you.
It's American Heart Month. By supporting the American Heart Association, helping kids like me and me. Thank you for your support.
And don't forget to complete my mission, and thanks for being a heart hero.